It's easier said than, yeah, we could, yes, we could actually talk. It's just a, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
74 Mara.
You got all these.
Okay.
The time is 7 o'clock, and we'll call to order the meeting for September 9th, 2019. Welcome. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones? Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's,
Can I make a
oh,
motion to
okay, you
excuse
can do that.
Councilmember Jones?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Tonight's invocation will be led by Chaplain Dan Moore of the Delaware City Police Department, and it will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
In Psalm 127, it reads, "Unless the Lord watches over the city, it is useless to guard it with sentries." Let us pray. O eternal God, creator of all mankind, author of life, I stand here today with mixed emotions. First, with gratitude for the beautiful day that you've given us and the privilege to enjoy its blessings. But it's also a time when we remember the horrific day 18 years ago in which a tragedy occurred on our soil that left an indelible imprint on our hearts as we witness the evil that lurks in the hearts of those with hatred, rage, and anger. As we heard the news of those that lost their lives, we also heard of the heroic acts and the sacrifices made by citizens, rescue crews, law enforcement, fire services, medical services, and a host of others, along with the bravery of those on Flight 93. On that day, we stood as a nation in unity and in grief and in prayer. Tonight, we stand in unity again in remembrance and prayer. We pray that God, that you would give the strength and comfort to those who lost loved ones that day. Give patience and healing to those who suffer daily with pain, physical and psychological. Assure those whose lives have been changed forever by the events of that day of your strength and protection. Lord, today we stand to ask that you would dispel nightmares, silence anxiety, give faith and wisdom that we may be your helping hands, strength to do justice, love to cast out fear, and the hope for a future. Lord, I stand here today to pray your protective hedge around this city. I continue to pray for the leadership, for the fire services, law enforcement, first responders, and all that take care of this city. In the words of the psalmist, unless you watch over the city, it is useless to guard it with sentries. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Chaplain. That was beautiful. Item 4 is the approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting council held August 26, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Browning, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Abstain. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting held on May 22nd, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Shade Tree Commission meeting held on June 25th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on August 7th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. Item D, resolution number 19-41, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a cooperative agreement with Delaware Township, Liberty Township, and Delaware County to submit an application to the Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC, for the project known as Brown-Miller Road Improvements Project, OPWC Route 34 application. Excuse me. And item E, resolution number 19-42, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a cooperative agreement with Delaware County for an application to the Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC, for the pavement resurfacing and rehabilitation of Bell Avenue and West William Street, Round 34 application. And item F, resolution number 19-43, a resolution approving the sale of a Sewer Department 2002 Ford E350 van equipped with televising equipment that have outgrown their useful serviceable life.
Phew. What is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? You'll give us your name and address for the record, please.
I'd be happy to, Mayor. Bill Reitz, 675 Pollyanna Drive, Delaware, Ohio, 43015. I've been before council a number of times in the last 11 months. This is well, it won't be my final appearance, but this is an exciting appearance to let you know that in 25 days across the street here, the statue that I came and spoke so eloquently about is a project by the community group that was formed, will be unveiled. It's open to the community. We did a save the date flyer for First Friday, 3 nights ago, whatever it was, and it was well received, and we're looking forward to October 4. We hope we have the same weather we had on this past Friday. But tomorrow we go to Zanesville. There's 4 of us from the community that are going to Zanesville. The bronze pouring of the statue will take place, and within an hour of the first pouring, they'll knock off the cast, and we'll see part 1, and then there's 3 total pourings, so by noon we should be able to see the 3 components that we put together. The students at Hayes, when they were part of the Pennies for the President drive, they signed a scroll, their names, and the principal will be going tomorrow. He has those scrolls, and we will be putting those into the legs of the statue. They'll be there in perpetuity. So there's some excitement all involved. With that said, the community's been very supportive. I know I came and thanked you for your donation from the community, what was it called? The community
Foundation.
Foundation, yes, the Community Foundation Fund. And that money has been reported to the proper person. So it's happening, and we're excited to say that it will be unveiled. The ceremony starts at 6:30 down in the plaza, and this time I'm going to hand out invitations that all the council members will have that on the calendar.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I guess the last thing I want to say is
Thank you.
this morning I was going to a meeting, and I was thinking of this whole project looking back, and I don't think there's a department that I did not approach with a question that I got an immediate reply from finance to the attorney's office to public relations to the engineer department, public works, planning, and it's been wonderful working with all those wonderful employees, and it kind of reassured that this was going to happen because they gave us the information we need so we can continue moving in a positive way. So you should be very proud, and I know you are very proud of your employees, but I just wanted to make a public announcement of that. there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not,
I just want to thank you for the hard work you've done, and it's exciting that it's going to come
It
to
is.
fruition. It
Yeah.
really, really is.
thanks.
It's been talked about for years, and you're the one that took us there, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward to anything? Good evening.
Hi, my name is Tom Hubble, and I live at 5 Mason Court, where I've lived for 41 years. If you recall, I just want to make 3 points about our YMCA, and the first one is to take a step back to our history. 11 years ago, we had a session with City Council, and there was some reluctance to put a levy on the ballot, and we got a whole lot of signatures, and Council agreed that in the face of those signatures, we would go ahead and get on the ballot. And boy, are we lucky we did, because August was fine, and it passed, and in September, the market crashed, and we never would have passed it in November. So we missed a bad moment there by getting it done in August. At that time, we also, all of us, there were so many people involved, our city manager and many citizens involved in the planning. And a big question we all had was, well, who's going to run this thing? And we looked at commercial options, and we looked at who really knows how to do this. And the clear choice was the YMCA knows how to do this. They've been managing recreation a lot of places for many years. And so we encouraged going ahead with an agreement there. And personally, I find that was a great decision, and I feel that it's been very successful. And really, that's my third point, is our problems now are about our success. Our Y is very busy, and it's one of the busiest in the territory. And in just a few years, it's gone from 0 to over 13,000 people. So I think we should celebrate that. We should, I hope all of us can turn down our rhetoric and make a successful resolution of our current issues. I'm really pleased with the new head person for the Central Ohio Y. I've had a number of conversations. I failed to mention that I'm an advisory board member of our local Y. Anyway, I feel we're in good hands with the Y, and we simply need to work out our current issues, and life will go on. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. Mrs. Keller?
I have a whole page.
Okay.
So the City Advisory Committee met with the YMCA last week on Tuesday. There were 3 major things that came out of that meeting. The first one was regarding staffing changes with the YMCA. A lot of the city's issues with the YMCA were regarding changing leadership, and a lot of it was based on the regional model that they had, where there was a regional aquatics director, for example, instead of having a person who was specifically designated at the local Y to be in charge of aquatics at the Delaware branch. So that posed a lot of communication issues, things being lost in just the chain of trying to figure out who's responsible for this. And so a major change that they've put forth is that they will be hiring an executive director and an associate executive that will be at Delaware only. And that person will be solely responsible for the branch and for communication with the city, which is a huge step in the right direction in terms of managing that. They've also hired an aquatics director, again, that will not be regionally based, but only based in Delaware, and a swim coach that will be based in Delaware. So we're hoping that those staffing changes will improve a lot of the leadership issues that we've been having. The second thing was a decision, a final decision regarding the force. The YMCA says that they do not rent space to an individual or group that have programs that the YMCA offers, and that is the final answer on that one. The third thing is something very, very positive regarding the rates. We spent a significant amount of the meeting discussing rates. The YMCA gave us a proposal and a promise to decrease the rates significantly for taxpayers in the city. They're still working through the specific numbers, and they will be providing that at a later date, but we expect those changes to take effect in January. They want to complete the budget year with the rates currently because they've, estimated their expenses and done a whole lot of things with that. But the change, very positive, will take place on January 1st. Regarding rec services, we'll hear from our city manager regarding what it would cost for the city to take over that portion of rec services at our next meeting. I still think it's worth at least exploring what that would look like so that perhaps the Y could focus on what they do well at the branch, and maybe we could focus on the recreation services piece. There were a few complaints that came in this week that are being worked through by the advisory committee and the Y regarding some issues with youth sports. So we're still actively working on those and actively working on the 60-day plan. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered it all
Okay.
very well.
I think just really
Good job.
quickly, Lisa, it was the city will have, be involved in the hiring process for the executive director?
Yes, there will be 2 staff members as part of the hiring committee from the city.
Good. Okay. All right, thank you very much, very informative. Mr. Browning?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Roy?
Nothing.
Mr. Hollinger?
Nothing other than just to say thanks to Lisa, because I know when this whole thing started, it looked like we were really running out of options, and I think the right thing has been done. We got it worked out, and they got answers to our issues, and they really kind of stepped up and did the things we needed them to do, so thanks for making that happen, because I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. We still have a lot of
Sure.
things to get through, but it's looking a lot more positive.
Right.
Yeah, I want to add George to that too, because I know you've both been going to a lot of meetings, so thank you both.
Thank you.
The only other thing I have is Tom and I have Warpsy this Thursday.
Morpsey, okay. All righty. Number 8 is presentations. And if the chiefs will join me down front. Thank you for everything you do, both of you, especially this time of year. The chaplain's got me crying over there. I'm all upset, so I'll do my best. Whereas National Preparation Month serves as a month-long observance to encourage every citizen in the city of Delaware to learn more about ways to prepare for all types of emergencies, from potential terrorist attacks to natural disasters. Whereas emergency preparedness is a responsibility of every citizen, and whereas all Americans can take a few simple steps, getting a kit, making a plan, and being informed in order to make citizens' preparedness a priority in kind of more keys in here in every community. Whereas FEMA and other federal, state, and local officials and the private sectors are working to deter, prevent, and respond to all types of emergencies. And whereas these activities, along with active American communities, contribute to a level of national preparedness that is critical to secure homeland, and whereas as we observe National Preparedness Month, not scared like that, I urge adults and citizens to participate in citizen preparedness activities such as organizing disaster supply kits, renewing insurance policies, and to learn life-saving skills. Now therefore I, Carolyn Haverhill, the mayor of the city of Delaware, do hereby proclaim October 2019 as National Preparedness Month. And I call upon the people of the city of Delaware to recognize the importance of preparing for all potential emergencies and to celebrate to appropriate events, activities, and preparedness programs. Shoot, Lee. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Would you both like to say something?
Sure.
Sure.
Right now, as we focus on September as being National Preparedness Month, it is a great opportunity for all of us. Unfortunate events 18 years ago certainly highlighted the impact that terrorism brings, but more focused here locally, we've been very blessed, but at the same time, day in and day out, our citizens here in Delaware and the city are impacted in some way, shape, form, or another with an emergency, whether it be law enforcement, fire, EMS. But fortunately, we have a good team, and why Chief Kujanowski and myself are up here accepting this. In the back of the room is the rest of the department directors that all play an important part of the team and focusing on the response here in our city. And I want to thank them as well. But also, as this proclamation says, there's much that we as a community, as citizens can do for preparedness. And as I mentioned, day in, day out, we have responses, and it's necessary that we have those preparations because we never know when that event's going to impact us. So we can make the kids, we can get telephone numbers together on who to make contact with. It goes a long way to be prepared. So I ask all citizens to take those steps.
And then I'll add another key to that conversation for us. A lot of things we do is preventable. So, Department of Homeland Security's talked about see something, say something. That's a very important part of preparedness is preventing some of the issues, especially in the wake of Dayton. It's very, very important.
And as we ask our citizens tomorrow, our city staff will be participating and working on a response to an event here in our city as a drill. So we do that several times a year, but we also follow that same creed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have one more proclamation. As we all know that on Wednesday, it's 911 Day. I don't know if I can do this. I was in DC again on Saturday, an honor flight. And as we show these veterans, the Pentagon, every time I go, just when I stand it, I never will. I can't do it. You're up, buddy. Sorry.
No worries.
It's all Chapman's fault, he started it.
Whereas Patriot Day serves as a day to remember when September 11, 2001 was etched into America's memory, when terrorists attacked the freedoms and values that have made our nation great. And whereas on the morning of September 11, 2001, 4 commercial passenger airliners were hijacked and used as weapons to kill nearly 3,000 innocent men, women, and children. And whereas people from all over the world were inspired by the heroism of our brave firefighters, police officers, and military, as well as countless others who aided the victims, who thought only of saving lives of others on that fateful day. And whereas in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, Americans united together to show the world that our nation stands together to defend our values of freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And whereas first responders, members of our armed forces, intelligence agencies, local officials, volunteers, and countless citizens support the cause of freedom and defend the security of our nation for both foreign and domestic threats that we continue to face. And whereas Patriots Day is an opportunity to pay tribute to the memory of the thousands of innocent victims that we lost, and honor the brave and heroic men and women who risk and sacrifice their lives so others can go home to their families. Therefore, on behalf of Mayor Karen Campbell of the City of Delaware, we proclaim September 11, 2019 as Patriot Day in the City of Delaware, and urge our citizens to set aside September 11 as a day to reflect and rededicate ourselves to ending terrorism and honor the victims of the attack at the 18th anniversary with a moment of silence beginning at 8:46 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Thank you very much. Sorry, but I am human too, and I fall apart. Okay, we'll move on to staff introduction. Ted, I think you have someone to introduce.
Madam Mayor, City Council, we are a little late bringing Cole in here, but Cole's been with us for probably 3 months now. So, but he's been doing a great job. He's our new golf course supervisor. So we kind of threw him in the mix out there. He's also brings some turf management, and we're going to continue his education and even expand that to aquatics. But we're going to use him in other places besides the golf course, though, too. He's going to be in our parks, in, like I mentioned, aquatics, and he's got a very good background. He's worked at several golf courses, Salt Fork, and even in Columbus. But he's fit in well with the team, and we've kept him pretty busy. So I don't know if you have anything to say, Cole, or if you want to.
I think so.
How's the golf course going this summer?
It's all right. We need more rain, but I never thought I would say that. Never thought I'd say that this year.
Good.
So it's going rather well.
Good.
Trying to learn the ins and outs of everything, so it's just a matter of time.
Well,
We'll get through
welcome.
this year.
We're glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're going to have a presentation by the Delaware County Board of Election. If you'd like to come forward at this time.
Just give it a, oops, you already moved it to that page.
My name is Allie Solove. I'm with the Board of Elections, 2079 US Highway 23 North in Delaware, Ohio. Mayor, Vice Mayor, staff, City Manager, and all the residents here. We do appreciate a few minutes of your time to go over a few things that have changed that affect all of us, especially coming up into the very popular elections coming up. Let's see here. Which one? Voters want to see who they have voted for before they cast their ballot. The old equipment kept a paper trail, but it was in the equipment. You could not see it. The new voting equipment prints a paper ballot for easy review, and the voters can verify their choices before casting their ballot. There's 3 steps to casting your ballot. The poll pads, which most people are aware of, is a poll pad that we look you up to make sure you're voting in the right location. We have you sign in, and you're given an authority to vote slip that the poll worker uses to pull up your ballot. That's been there since 2015. The new equipment implemented in 2019, which we had in May, but it was a very, very small election. So that's why we're rolling it out as if it's new. We are required to take it out into the communities when we have new equipment, so we do appreciate you letting us come here. We have something called a ballot marker. Hopefully most people have had a chance on the way in to look at it. It's actually called a freedom vote, but it makes your ballot. That's all it does, is make your ballot for you. No records are kept in that. And then it gives the opportunity for the voter to look again to verify that's who they want to vote for before they would put it in the ballot tabulator or the OVO. When they cast it and insert it into the OVO, it does show them that the vote count went up, and it thanks them for their ballot.
Wait,
for their
you better tell me
vote.
what OVO is.
Pardon me?
I know,
Optical.
but they may not know.
Well, let's just say it's just an abbreviation. It's the ballot. We're trying to make it so that everyone understands. We have a ballot marker and we have a ballot tabulator, because there's quite a few initials of everything. You know that. Quite a few of you, I think, in the crowd have worked at the polls, right? I know the mayor you have. I think Tom, your wife does. Darren does. Anybody else here work at the polls? Well, those high schoolers will. Kyle has. Those high schoolers will, because I asked them, and they're all juniors. You have to be a senior, so next year I've already given them all a flyer. The election tools we use, again, we have the poll pad that you check in. We've had that around for quite a while. Everyone likes it. It's very efficient. And the new equipment is the tabulator that your ballot is cast in. This is the Freedom Vote or the ballot marker. We have one out on the table there as a demo that we take around with us. We cannot transport these carts, but on the carts there is 4 of those, and they will all have a privacy screen around them. It also makes it much easier for our poll workers that the carts are already there. They just have to take the lids off, turn them on, and start them up that way. We also are always in need of election officials. In our county, we need about 900 to 1,000 poll workers for one election. We have 48 locations, we have 165 precincts, and each location has to have a bipartisan equal number of the major parties, which in this county is Republican and Democrat. The voting equipment varies on the size of the locations, but there's a bare minimum, 2 poll pads and 1 ballot marker cart, and 2 to 4 tabulators. At the end of the evening, the thumb drive that comes out of the ballot tabulator is how we get our results. None of our equipment sends it through the internet. They do not speak to each other, so we do not get any results till all of that comes back to the Board of Elections. After the election, we had a really wonderful thing. We had a poll worker appreciation at the Board of Elections. We had over 200 people The lady right there, Eloise Collier, she's 95 years old, and she's still making it to the polls. And if somebody says, oh, it's a long day, I'm like, well, if Eloise can do 15 hours, you can do a 15-hour day. We also have a woman who's in her 55th year of being a poll worker. So we gave out awards, and the poll workers really appreciate it. How you can be involved: spread the word, use your social media, Twitter, Facebook, the city website, utility bills, publications, your bulletin boards. You can volunteer yourself, and we say volunteer, but you still get paid. And come see how our elections run in our county. When I hear people say they don't trust the systems or whatever, it's like, come and work for a day at your local area. And if you really have any doubts, come and work leading up to the election. We have seasonal help that we need. And then people get a better understanding. We can never talk about anybody else's county, but our county, our elections are secure and safe, and we want our voters to know that. We also have a Facebook page. You can check it out and share it. We'd appreciate that. This is the important dates for this upcoming election. We have a voter registration deadline. We have UOCAVA starts going out. We have mail-in absentee deadlines. So this is on our website at the Board of Elections, and these are the hours of the absentee in-person vote center, which will be opening up on October 8th, I'm sorry. And before I leave here, I would like to acknowledge the Chief of Police, Pijanowski, and Chief Donahue. We are a Delaware County, but we are in the city, and we do appreciate their being there for our services if we would ever need them. So, does anybody have a question? Also, in your packets, you did receive a flyer for poll workers. As I said, we have a lot of people who keep doing it. We have locations all around the county. A lot of times, people from an organization can get together. We still pay them individually, but if they wanted, they can then donate that money to some organization that they pick. And we have the best poll workers I think in the state or the country. And this past election was not as large. November will be pretty large, but in 2020, we will probably again be the #1 county in the state of Ohio with over a 80 to 82% turnout, which is very impressive. Anything? Well, we appreciate you coming in here. And again, all you students, remember, next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Item 10 is the second reading of resolution number 19-40. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Resolution number 19-40, a resolution adopting the 2020 through 2024 5-year capital improvement plan, the CIP.
Really, this is another reading of the plan, which council will be taking up formally at a work session this Thursday night. And we have one more work session scheduled for, I believe it's the 30th, September 30th. And that's the second and final. I put at your place tonight something you'd received electronically back, I think, in June or July. It's the cemetery master plan. As all of you know, we now own and operate the Oak Grove Cemetery, which was previously operated by an organization that ended up no longer being able to operate it. We've taken it over, and we're trying to look at its future. And we'd really like council, if they get a chance, to spend some time going through the plan. There's some policy questions that we have to answer as a community as to the future of that resource. That master plan that Ted has been leading in his efforts, as well as Dean and some others, lays out a lot of recommendations in terms of looking at it both as a resource but also as a kind of a business operation. So we'd like to, if we can, spend some time on that Thursday night. And also we'll go through some of the larger operating departments, public utilities, public works, and parks. I'll also have the chief will give an update on the shooting range that he talked about when he was here a few months ago. There's a lot of progress that's being made on that. So that is Thursday night at 6, Elaine, is that when we're getting started?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. So, and if you have questions or suggestions of what you want to review as part of the plan, let us know. But again, it's really the major operating departments, and we'll also have some discussion. There's some other policies, recommendations in there that have come about through the fire chief and others, so we'll touch on those as well. So if you have any questions in advance, or suggestions about areas that you want to, us to concentrate on, let me know. I know Councilman Hellinger was not going to be able to attend the meeting, is going to provide some stuff in writing, and I'll appreciate that. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we'll see you Thursday about that.
Alrighty. Item 11 and 12, if you want to read this on the record for me. Consideration of ordinance number 19-53 and 19-54.
Ordinance number 19-53, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat request by Westport Homes for Springer Woods, Section 2, Phase 2, containing 21 single-family lots on approximately 5.471 acres zoned R3, one family residential district, and located on Scarlet Drive and Aaron Drive. An ordinance number 19-54, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat request by Westport Homes for Springer Woods, Section 2, Phase 3, containing 22 single-family lots on approximately 5.65 acres zoned R3, one family residential district, and located on Bevan Way and Aaron Drive.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, we would request, in talking with the developer, that we take this to another reading. We're working out a couple of items with them. We want to make sure that we present it and bring it back to you in final form. So we would request together taking it to another reading.
Okay, no problem. Item 13 is consideration of ordinance number 19-55. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Ordinance number 19-55, an ordinance supplementing the 2019 appropriations ordinance in the amount of $75,000 and authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Pros Consulting for a Parks and Recreation master plan.
Thank you.
This really builds on the discussion City Council had at its last meeting. You heard from a Pros Consulting consultant regarding their approach to a master plan. Ted, you want to come forward? You can add a couple of things to this, but this really gives us the ability to step back and take a look at our recreation programming, currently how it's being handled, taking a look at its future, taking a look at our facilities. The first thing is really a needs assessment, and that's really what we focused on. And as part of that needs assessment, there will be a community survey, statistically valid survey. This will not be done through SurveyMonkey or on Facebook. It will be done as a statistically valid and reliable survey that will provide City Council and the community feedback about the utilization of recreation programs, what programs are utilized, what the city, what residents are interested in seeing, what you might not be interested in seeing. And it helps, I think, will help us frame, I think, some of the discussion around the question about whether the city continues to do whether the Y continues under a contract with us to do recreation services, or whether the city elects to reestablish its Parks and Recreation Department that we had in place prior to the YMCA. So the Pros Consulting, as you heard at the last meeting, has done a lot of work in Central Ohio. In particular, they did work in Huber Heights, and Huber Heights has a similar relationship with the YMCA, where they actually provide contracted recreation services to the city of Huber Heights. And so they have a kind of, what I think is kind of a niche experience in this kind of unique partnership that we have with the YMCA. So I think this will be helpful. What you have before you tonight is an ordinance authorizing a supplemental appropriation really from two sources, our Parks Impact Fee Fund and our Parks Exaction Fee Fund, both which have balances that would allow this expenditure to be made. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And we can go to another reading if you'd like some more discussion about it, but I think this will help us move this conversation forward in a more informed way, to really try to come up with some ideas or some recommendations about recreation program. And Ted, did you want to add anything? There is a memo from Mr. Miller in your packet.
Just that I know last time we talked, we kind of focused more on recreation programming and the needs assessment there. But the addition of this is we're looking at recreation also, not just the programming, expanding that and kind of next year going in that next phase of the recreation side of it, where we have, the South Community Park is another, Blaring you know, where we have some recreation needs down there also with the new community park. But I think the expanding this to an overall master plan will really benefit our department.
And it ties in, as we said at the last meeting, to the the comprehensive plan update. This becomes, I think, a piece of that. I think that the timing is good because this, I think, will wrap up about the same time that the comprehensive plan steering committee is finishing its work, so.
And the firm we're looking at is very well versed in this, and it's not just a plan that's going to sit there. There's an action plan that's involved in it that will really, you know, lay out the steps to get where we want to go.
How many do you plan on surveying? I mean, has he talked about that
It's
at all?
about 300, I think, to make it statistically valid for our population, it's
For
about
40,000.
360. And then they would be a combination of telephone surveys, mail surveys, as well as online. There's different methods, it's laid out there. But I think the last time we did a survey was with Saperstein, it was 2015, but it was really more of a community-wide survey. It wasn't focused on recreation needs, park facilities and that type of thing. This has a more it's more of a focused effort to help provide us that information. But yeah, the firm they team up with does this exclusively, this and transportation surveys. So I think you'll be pleased, and I'll be interested to hear what the feedback is. I mean, I really want, and I think it'll be useful for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Council.
The price tag surprised me.
Me
I thought
too.
that was a little much. I mean, they look great and all that stuff. The other thing that bugs me is that we don't have, as far as the rec levy funding going away, and so we'll have this master plan and no money to do anything. And so I'm kind of,
Well,
so I get it, but I'm also I'm on the fence.
I think and I'd be happy to split it up and hold off on the second phase of it and just do the first phase, and the phase 2 could be if authorized. I'd be happy to do it that way. I think it will provide us with useful information about what our needs are. I think we accelerated this. It's in the CIP as a project for next year. If you take a look at the CIP, Ted had recommended we do something next year. We've accelerated it in view of our discussions with the YMCA about recreation services. So it's really just that piece I think is important. If you'd like, we can write the contract in such a way is that the second phase, which is about $40,000, would be an if authorized. And I'd come back to City Council and after we've had the results, and you could then decide at that point, do you think it makes sense to move ahead? But at some point, we've got to evaluate. We haven't done this really since the rec levy, evaluate what our longer term needs are. So I hear what you're saying, but I also know that at some point somebody's going to say we have these needs. What do we, what are the funding options for those? So
What does the second part tell us? I mean, I know the first part's doing it. What does the second part tell us?
I think it's really taking a look at your actual facilities and do those align with what your needs are, what your residents are telling you. So whether it's we need a new park in the southeast part of the city, it needs to be 60 acres, or we need to expand Mingo in some way, or we need to add more facilities at Smith Park, or we need to build another community swimming pool. Or might want to consider putting a dome over the Jack Florence pool. It's facility information, but it's also program information. We have a shortage of, this type of program in the community, or that type of thing. I guess that's why I would recommend just doing it as if authorized. We'd come back, and I was going to recommend. I'd recommend you engage the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee to help with this work. And that's one of their functions, is to make recommendations on Parks and Recreation. And they really, since the Y has taken a bigger role in our recreation program, and their role as an entity has not been as prominent as it once was. So we could do it, split it up if you'd like. And that way it's like $35,000 at this point. So.
Let me just interject, so just based on the presentation they gave last time. So the first part of this is all the survey stuff that gets into what the public wants. The second half, they do a facility assessment and then a program assessment, and then at the end, they're gonna give us their recommendations and a master plan to move forward. I think the program assessment is really important because we're at a point of trying to make a decision that we wanna take over recreation services or not. And I think having the public feedback is important, but I think that program assessment helps us make that decision. I mean, there's a financial piece, but there's also, you know, what fits our needs.
I mean, our agreement with the Y for recreation services takes us through 20. And if we're gonna transition, if council says that, you know, we're gonna transition and we're going to reestablish our parks department, our recreation department, we need to know that sooner, we need to know that now, really, because reestablishing a department is not, you just don't, you go to Amazon and get a recreation department. It's a big operation. You've got staff and programs and all the rest of it, so this'll help.
I guess I admittedly wasn't at the last meeting, but I kinda was with Jim. It gave me a little sticker shock, so
Yeah.
maybe if we could go to another reading and.
That's fine. That's
Consider
fine.
that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I think we can talk to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board about it. As I said, I'd be willing to just do it, the second phase is if authorized, but it gives you that ability to say yes or no.
What's their time frame once they get the okay to do it?
I think they were thinking about the first phase, probably about 3 to 5 months, so probably the balance of this year. That would give us the information we need going into next year. We really have to think about, we gotta think about this seriously. But yeah, another reading is fine. We said first or second, 1 or 2 readings is fine.
Okay.
And we'll have input from the Parks Board next week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 14 is discussion and update on dual suspension guidelines.
It's Dave and Darren. Lucky presenters for what started back in July is discussion of rule suspension. We provided a memo back in July to council about that.
Yeah, I think, I can start, Darren. I think, Madam Mayor, members of council, what we did is we took your existing guidelines for readings. We had a little discussion about it here at council, obviously. Took your direction to put something together in writing for you to react to, but really tried to key this more to how our process and how our code reads and works now. Hopefully at this point, it's been on the agenda a few times. We haven't had a chance to talk about it, but hopefully you've had a chance to review this. So that was our goal when Darren and I put this together. And I guess we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. There's a few simple changes, but really ties to that, what's in our ordinances today in terms of the development ordinances and how we process cases.
Yeah, the only thing I would point out, emphasize what Dave said, is just kind of, like a better word, nibbling at the edges. We didn't take the whole thing and redo it. We just kind of tweaked it to sort of address some of those areas that we find ourselves considering suspending the rules on, but they aren't necessarily in the guidelines. So now we can be a little bit more, for lack of a better word, transparent about what we're doing. And the other thing I'll say while you're considering it is, again, these are just guidelines. It's council's complete prerogative to take it to more readings or take it to less readings. The genesis of the guidelines was we were having folks come to city council who kind of were developing an expectation that, well, I kind of want this done on the first reading, and we kept having to explain to them, well, we don't usually do that. So this sort of sets expectations for people coming before council, but in the strange situation, or if council desires, you still can do whatever you want as long as you have the votes to suspend the rules.
That sentiment's still captured in item 2D. What Darren just.
So can I
Yeah,
take
jump
a
in.
stab at, so with regard to one of the things on our agenda tonight that we didn't end up moving forward with because of the applicant wanting to make some changes, but let's pretend that they were here on the Springer Woods final subdivision plat, and this is one of those things that we've tossed around before. It's up for a first reading. And I guess I ask this already knowing the answer, but for the benefit of everyone here that may not know the answer. What would be a justifiable reason why we would turn down a final subdivision plat? or I guess sort of by the time it gets to that point, what process has it already gone through?
Yeah, and that's a great question, great example. So a final plat, and to use the example, doesn't require a public hearing. So the way these guidelines are addressed, they address things that require public hearings and things that don't require public hearings. So things that don't require a public hearing, a formal public hearing, are typically like this, a final subdivision plat that as long as everything's, the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, coming forward from planning commission staff, there really isn't a reason to deny from a planning perspective or probably a legal perspective, barring something totally egregious. There isn't really a reason to deny that from my perspective for council. At that point, we've gone through a lot of process to get to that point of a final subdivision plat. And there are other examples, as I know you know, Lisa, with respect to things that require public hearings and things that don't. So things like zone changes, big questions like that, things like conditional use permits, where you might have more immediate impacts on adjacent neighbors, but still maybe significant impacts that require some discussion and public hearing input. Those would still be reserved for at least 2 readings, and the expectation would be, continue to be, I guess, expect 3 readings, and I guess the applicant hope for 2, depending on whether there's controversy involved or there are just things that we got to talk about. Does that answer your question?
It does. So what I'm thinking is, some of the things that actually come before us as ordinances, I'm thinking we could rewrite some of our rules so that if they are perfunctory decisions where there would be no legal justification to say no public hearing required, that be more of an administrative decision rather than an ordinance that council passes. Because I think that there's some confusion in that process of, well, it's an ordinance, we should be seeking public input and we should be having 3 long readings, and essentially a lot of other cities just make those decisions as part of an administrative decision, and then save the agenda items for things where obviously public input is very important on some of those things. But I mean, tonight's a really perfect example of, there's no legal justification on the planet that won't land us in court for us to say no. There's not a single thing that anyone from the public could bring forward that could lead us to a no in that case, because we're at the point of a final subdivision plat.
I definitely think I appreciate your comments and things that we've talked about a little bit in general before. Those are things we could take a look at and see which items technically need to end in an ordinance or some action by council, and those items that don't have to do that, and see if we can push some more down on the administrative side. In addition to, I think this is probably a decent start to say public hearing, no public hearing, and we can continue to look at that. Part of what comes to my thinking when you mention that is, as we work our way through our comprehensive plan and then really hopefully go into a major process of updating our zoning code to better reflect what I think is an emerging new plan, a new way to kind of look at our community in the comprehensive plan. That's a good moment too to change some of those processes within the zoning code. So, but we could certainly take a look at some of them that are sort of easy to do in the next year or two, because those 2 processes, you're talking about years to complete them in reality. But there are maybe some lower, easier items to complete, such as subdivision plats or final subdivision plats. So Darren, do you have any thoughts in that regard?
Other than I think there are things we could conceivably shift from council action to an administrative task. It would be council's prerogative to do that. I think probably in the past, we've talked about this in completely other areas, but there's been a sense that you might not want to give up council's authority to look at it. However, you do make a good point. If there's really no real discretion, then you're not really giving up anything real, because if your city attorney says you can't turn it down because you don't like this, then what's the point of even having it? So
what it just makes it seem like to people who don't understand the process is, we're just not accepting public opinion and we're rushing through the process, and I think it's giving a false appearance in those cases that, hey, we're rushing through this process because there really is no process left. We're at the end of a very long process. I don't know how anybody else.
Or conversely, we're given a lot of input where maybe it's not applicable.
Right.
I think it's good example of one element we've done that in is the acceptance of public improvements process. All of that used to end with the council resolution of acceptance, and we did change our code and our process to do that at an administrative staff level for all the reasons that you're talking about.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
feel
just an
this,
example.
I feel the same way about parking and safety approving handicap parking spots. You know, on what planet justification would we ever give to not approve a parking spot when there's a letter from a physician saying someone's entitled to it? So it's these sort of things that make our meetings take longer, and we're going through steps we don't really need to go through.
In addition, if you do grant some administrative authority to planning department or whatever department, and it starts doing things and council is not pleased with the way that's going, you certainly could instruct us to change it back. So it's not a permanent thing if we wanted to give it a try. So I think it's worth Dave and I sitting down and seeing what we can maybe prune from the agendas.
So it'll still go to planning, like this did last week?
Well, I think that'd be part of the conversation too, because there are probably some things that even go to planning that you might consider having just administrative decisions on. Development plan exemptions, for example, with the idea being that those are sort of de minimis. I already make a determination that they don't require a development plan, but I have to go to planning commission to essentially have that decision ratified. It's a check and balance in a way, which is fine, but it is an extra step that very rarely results in conditions that we haven't already recommended. So in terms, you don't see those, but that's just an example for you that would help maybe clear some of the planning commission's docket for the same type of reason. And I know Councilwoman Keller, she served on planning, so she knows, she's experienced some of those. That might be an example of where we could look a little more in depth.
Yeah, the other thing, and I'm not as versed in the process as Dave is, but you know, you go through the whole process with an early stage, and then basically if you do all the things that are kind of set up already, do you really need to come back if you've done all the work early on? That's what we have to figure out, but it feels like between the preliminary and the final, there's probably one of the stages where there's a lot of input, and then one where if they're just continuing that same path, maybe we can talk about streamlining that a bit.
Yeah, some communities have final plats and at their planning commission, or final plans even end at their planning commission. So, things we can discuss.
So, what's the next step? Ultimately, a resolution revising the guidelines that are currently.
Oh, the guidelines? Yeah, I think we would just, doesn't technically even need a resolution, but just so council is all on the same page, we'd go ahead and turn it into a resolution and pass that.
Okay.
I think that's the next step for this project. It's a bigger project with the Dave project we were just talking about, but
right.
In terms of the guidelines, if council is amenable to that, we'd just turn it into a resolution and have them vote on it to make sure it's okay.
Now, I just want to clarify one thing. We're talking about plats, not plans.
And it's one thing, yes, but we could also talk about development plans if we want as well. In a way, they are even more administrative than, for the most part, than plats.
I'm just thinking of this scenario. We get a preliminary development plan. We go through our process, goes to planning commission.
Yep.
Let's say it's a controversial case, so planning commission takes it to multiple readings, which is pretty typical.
Yep.
It comes to council. Sometimes we've taken things to 5, 6, 7 readings. If they go back and make changes, that final plan should come back before us through the same open process, I think. I'm only talking about plats, where there's no.
Of course, the flip side would be if they don't make changes, don't you still have to finalize it, Dave?
Yeah, yes, to both of you, I think it's also a case where we could be stricter or more formal about amending a preliminary, because I think what happens a lot is that we have a lot of those discussions and controversy out at a preliminary. Yes, we do sometimes at final too, obviously, but a lot of times in those controversial cases, we do that through preliminary, it ends in council's decision one way or the other. If it's affirmative, then there's not as much controversy as when the final comes through, as long as it's in keeping with that approved preliminary. So there are situations like that that we might want to think about, so we don't set, I think what you were saying, we don't set false expectations for ourselves or the public or anybody. Hey, listen, if the final's in keeping with the preliminary, we've gone through the process, then there's really no reason to turn it down at that point. If there are changes, then there are changes, and that may or may not be big, they may or may not need to go back through a formal process. Finding some of those lines is that you're talking about a little bit bigger work item, but I think we could kind of break it down to easier, quicker stuff, and then stuff we probably need to talk about a little bit more.
So, the guidelines that are in the packet tonight, that are just, you made some revisions to what is currently before council?
I mean, if they wanted to, Derek, could they just pass this as revised for new guidelines tonight, so they don't have to have another reading on this?
I need to take it to a full council. I want Chris here.
Okay.
Chris has brought this up
Yep.
several times. So,
We could put it together in a resolution
Sure.
form and print it on the meeting for the 23rd.
I think the biggest issue is just the expectation sometimes,
Yeah.
that, you know, we're under pressure to suspend the rules, and we don't feel like, for whatever reason, whether we wanna even articulate it or not, just, hey, I'd rather take this to a third, because, you know, that there's sometimes a lot of pushback there.
Yeah.
And that expectation should be, 3 readings is pretty standard. If it gets bumped up faster than that, you're really kind of lucky. And then we can take steps to streamline the processes where we're dragging our heels unnecessarily, and then I think that'll even it out, perhaps.
I think the hardest part will be getting under this glass and replacing the pieces of paper. They're all under, so far under.
Just doesn't make sense to have that paper under there and then not follow it.
Yeah.
I'll have that ready in a resolution form for the next meeting.
George, did you have anything to add?
No, I think it's all been discussed. I think it's good.
You good, Kyle? Okay. All righty. City manager's report.
Couple of items. As you know, we have applied for an additional amount of funding for the Point project, approximately $8 million. Will be before Bill, myself, and Matt Weber will be before the Transportation Review Advisory Council on Wednesday, making a presentation to that board for additional funding. And they've already approved us in the amount of $1.5 million, but because of issues that we've been having in terms of the alignment of the new bridge, the project costs are anticipated to go up, which is really kind of out of our control. So we'll be making an appearance on Wednesday. Bill, do you want to add anything to that process? I know we did score, I believe, what was it?
We scored in the mid-range, other large state projects, multiple projects in the central housing. Overseas scored us in the middle as well. So I think we stand a decent opportunity. Tom did get to meet with the director of transportation last week and just put a good word in for a project. So we'll let you know after Wednesday, and the process takes about 3 to 4 weeks after that to get a preliminary scoring from track and see where we land.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time shot though. This is just our first time going back and saying we need a strong funding partnership. We're asking them to continue to be part of it. We can always continue to advance the project and go back again subsequent years.
So that's, yeah. go
I
ahead.
understand the price ticket's gone up like $5 million because of the alignment now.
Yeah, most of the additional costs is attributable to the railroad's final choices in the option they wanted, which, not surprisingly, benefits the railroad the most.
They really want the alignment to stay in the same location, which means building a temporary bridge, which is costly, and then taking out the old bridge, putting in the new bridge, and then taking out the temporary bridge. So it's just added costs like that. I think I've mentioned this to you before. When I was in Connecticut, my last community, we had a very similar project, and the railroads are just They have thousands of these projects all around the country, and to them, they're indifferent to the backups along 36 and 37. Their trains are moving along fine, so if you want that bridge replaced before we need to replace it, because at some point they will have to replace it, but that's not now, then you're really kind of at their mercy, unfortunately. So, but anyway, we'll be making that pitch on Wednesday before the track, and hopefully we'll have some good news in the next couple of months. City Council priorities, we're almost ready to provide council with the feedback on the priorities that you identified, and hopefully I'll have that in my bi-weekly report that will be going out on Friday. The Arts Castle had a really nice 30th anniversary. The mayor presented a proclamation, as did Commissioner Merrill. That went very, very nicely. Mural projects are moving along. I think I sent out an update. I spoke with Aaron Fletcher today, the Ross Art Museum director, about the 3 installations. One will be on our Ross Street building. These will reflect the work that the community did as part of those mural projects. The other project will be on the Common Ground Free Store building and Andrew's house. So you will see artists. The artists will come in on the 14th. They'll be here all of next week working on those various locations, but I think that'll add public art to our community, which is really one of the first times we've had that type of public art. So that's a good thing. The comp plan, there's a meeting tomorrow night, right, Dave? You've got
Tomorrow night's next meeting is steering committee. Lots of land use discussion tomorrow.
Yeah, and I want to recognize Kyle and Sean. Sean's not here, but they became certified economic development certified economic development. What am I missing? The last?
Just through the state of Ohio, through Ohio Economic Developers Association, we both got the state certified economic development professional certification.
So we now have 2 people on our staff
Yeah,
with
so
that designation, which is
double the fun.
Yeah, which is great.
Which means more CE classes, right?
That's right. Right. And we talked about the CIP, and we have a finance-related discussion tomorrow with the hotel developers, the Fairfield Inn project. That is tomorrow afternoon. We have a conference call to discuss that project and its status, and hopefully I'll be able to report something back to council in my bi-weekly report on Friday.
That's at 1 o'clock?
Yeah, it's a little later. No, it's 3. I'm sorry.
3, okay.
Yeah, 3. And Morpsey is coming for a visit on Wednesday. Their normal community visit, and Kyle will probably be handling most of that, but they'll be here on Wednesday. So.
Council comments? Mrs. Keller?
On Monday, September 16th, I'm having the residential speeding meeting at the National Guard at 6:30. I think it's 6:30. It is 6:30. Talking about the traffic calming guide that was just approved by us and how it could possibly help residents in my ward. I'm opening it up if other residents want to come, if they have speeding issues in their neighborhoods. They could come learn about what the traffic calming guide says and how it can be applied to their individual neighborhoods. One of the first things it says is they need to organize themselves as a group and then make a request. So I think sharing that information with a lot of the streets that we've had repeated complaints regarding, we can get that ball rolling and help to get them organized.
Nothing, thank you.
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Nothing, thank you.
I had a couple complaints today about election signs. So Ally, can you come forward for a second, please, since you're here?
I hope I can answer your question.
I do too.
Again, do I need to?
Now you're good. At what point can election signs go up prior to the election, which is November 5th?
30 days.
30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens if they're already up? Because I don't want to spend our taxpayers' money going out and picking these up.
Right, this is always an ongoing issue. Election day, those rules are a little different. We always say, if it is, I'm just going to use this because this is where it begins. On election day, 100 feet out from the front door is the Board of Elections. There's absolutely no signs at all to be there.
Mm-hmm.
If there's an issue with that, since we're our county, if there's an issue and they will not take them down, the sheriff's office gets involved. So we have the inside of the building and the 100 feet. Beyond the 100 feet, it's the property owner's discretion. So I'll just use an example. There's a church on Home Road, okay? So if it's outside that 100 feet up to their property line, it is a discretion of that landowner to force that they be removed. Beyond that line, onto the right-of-way, it's either the city, township, state road that would do that. We do have some people sometimes like, well, there's that sign there. Well, it's a right-of-way, it's really not ours, it's a township issue. Call your township about it, call the landowner about it. But as a Board of Elections, we cannot enforce anything. We just can direct them as to who they can call to get that enforced. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Other than that, I want to apologize for falling apart, but that's just what I do every now and then. I was on Honor Flight Saturday. It was a fabulous day. We took 98 veterans. My gentleman happened to be 96 years old. So it was a pretty phenomenal day, and they just get better every time I go. I'll go again on September 28th, and then again on October 16th is the big one. So sorry I fell apart. And with that, oh yes, Cane's opens. The ribbon cutting was this afternoon, just before we got here. Tonight, it'll open tomorrow to the public. So, very exciting. With that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And we are adjourned at 8:11. You girls picked a great one to come to, because we're never done this early.